The morning my daughter opened my front door to a line of smiling tenants, she believed I was still locked inside a nursing home 40 miles away. She stood on my porch wearing a cream-colored blazer, holding a clipboard in one hand and a ring of my house keys in the other. A bright sign near the driveway read, "Luxury Lakefront Rental. Open house today." Inside, strangers walked through my kitchen, opened my cabinets, measured my bedrooms, and discussed where their furniture would go. My daughter told them the owner had moved permanently into assisted living. She said the house was available immediately. She said all personal belongings left inside would be removed before the lease began. What she did not know was that I had checked myself out of the facility the previous evening. She did not know that the doctor she claimed had declared me incompetent had signed a sworn statement proving the exact opposite. She did not know that my attorney was standing behind the couple near the fireplace, and she certainly did not know that the two quiet men waiting beside the moving truck were financial crimes investigators. I waited until she accepted a $12,000 cashier's check from the first applicant. Then I stepped through my own front door and said, "Before you rent my house, you should ask my daughter why she put its legal owner in a nursing home without his consent." The check slipped from her fingers. The room went completely silent. And for the first time in 3 years, my daughter finally looked at me without seeing an old man she could control. My name is Thomas Reed. I am 74 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being a good father meant forgiving your child before they even asked. I believed family loyalty required patience. I believed conflict should remain private. And I believed that no matter how deeply your own child hurt you, exposing them would destroy the family more than their actions ever could. My daughter used those beliefs like keys. She used them to access my money. She used them to enter my home. She used them to control my doctors. And finally, she used them to lock me inside a facility while she rented out the life I had built. What she forgot was that keys work both ways. They can open a door, and they can also lock someone out forever. Before I continue, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. Subscribe to Mark Cole. For more powerful stories about betrayal, courage, justice, and people who finally refuse to disappear quietly. I spent 41 years working as a fire safety engineer in Minnesota. My job was to inspect hospitals, schools, factories, apartment buildings, and care facilities. I examined alarms, exit routes, sprinkler systems, emergency lighting, and evacuation plans. Most people believed fires were sudden disasters. They were not. The flame might appear suddenly, but the danger usually developed slowly. A blocked exit, a disabled alarm, a damaged wire, a missing inspection. Small failures accumulated until one spark turned them into catastrophe. I learned to pay attention to details other people ignored. A door that did not close properly. A sensor that had been painted over. A report with a suspicious signature. Those details saved lives. But in my own family, I ignored every warning. My wife, Helen, and I married when we were both 23. We did not have much. I was completing technical training, and Helen worked at a public library. We rented a small upstairs apartment above a bakery. Every morning, the smell of fresh bread entered through the floorboards before sunrise. Helen loved that apartment. I hated the plumbing. When our daughter, Claire, was born, we decided we needed a real home. We found an old 2-story house beside Lake Minnetonka. The property had peeling paint, damaged windows, and an overgrown yard. The previous owner had neglected it for years, but the foundation was strong. The roofline was beautiful, and the back porch faced the water. Helen stood in the empty dining room and said, "This house is tired, but it isn't finished." That sentence became the philosophy of our marriage. We repaired the house slowly. I replaced wiring after work. Helen stripped wallpaper and restored the wooden floors. We planted apple trees near the driveway. I built a dock. Helen created a reading room from a narrow space beneath the stairs. Claire grew up inside those rooms. She learned to walk across the living room rug. She practiced piano in the front room. She celebrated every birthday beneath the maple tree near the lake. She was our only child, and we gave her everything we could. Claire was intelligent, ambitious, and socially gifted. She knew how to make adults feel important. Teachers loved her. Neighbors trusted her. She could enter any room and understand exactly what people wanted from her. As a child, that ability seemed charming. As an adult, it became dangerous. Helen and I paid for Claire's university education. Then graduate school. Then a year of rent when she accepted an unpaid internship in Chicago. When she launched a marketing agency, we invested $60,000. The business failed after 18 months. Claire blamed her partner. We covered the business debt. When she married Michael, they wanted a large wedding at a lakeside resort. I suggested something smaller. Claire cried. She said she had spent her entire life imagining that day. Helen convinced me to help. The wedding cost more than our first house. Claire promised it was the last time she would ask for a major financial gift. It was not. There was always another need. A down payment, a business opportunity, a medical bill, a school fee for her son, a home renovation, an emergency vacation after a stressful year. Every request arrived wrapped in urgency. Every refusal became evidence that I did not care. Helen often defended her. "She's under pressure," she would say. "She'll become more responsible. She's our daughter." Those words ended many arguments. Then Helen became ill. Pancreatic cancer moved through her body with terrifying speed. She died 11 months after diagnosis. During those months, Claire became attentive. She visited several times a week. She brought groceries. She spoke to doctors. She organized medications. She told Helen she would take care of me. Helen believed her. On the final evening of her life, Helen held Claire's hand and said, "Your father is stronger than he thinks, but don't let him become lonely." Claire cried. She promised. For the first year after Helen's death, Claire visited often. Then the visits became less frequent. The phone calls became shorter. Eventually, most conversations involved money. Claire and Michael had moved into a large house near Minneapolis. Their mortgage was enormous. Michael worked in medical equipment sales, but his commissions were inconsistent. Claire's second marketing business looked successful online. She posted photographs from conferences, restaurants, luxury hotels, and client events. But she continued asking me for help. I began saying no. That changed our relationship. Claire became impatient with my habits. She said the lake house was too large. She complained that I still drove myself. She questioned whether I remembered appointments. If I misplaced my glasses, she mentioned memory decline. If I repeated a story, she suggested speaking to a doctor. At first, I believed she was concerned. Then her concern became increasingly connected to my property. The lake house had become extremely valuable. New developments surrounded the area. Real estate agents sent letters every month offering to list it. A nearby house sold for $2.3 million. My property included more shoreline and a larger lot. Claire knew exactly what it was worth. She began calling the house the family asset. I corrected her. "It's my home," she smiled. "Of course, Dad. I just mean eventually." Eventually. That word appeared often. Eventually, the house would become difficult to maintain. Eventually, I would need care. Eventually, selling would make sense. Eventually, everything I owned would become hers. I understood the logic. I simply did not realize she had decided eventually had already arrived. The incident she used began on a winter morning. I was carrying firewood from the garage when I slipped on ice near the back steps. I landed hard against my left hip. The pain was immediate. My neighbor, Robert Ellis, heard me call for help. An ambulance took me to the hospital. The fracture was serious but treatable. The surgeon repaired the hip the following morning. He said recovery would require several weeks of physical therapy. Claire arrived before the operation. She cried beside my bed. She said the accident proved I should not be living alone. I told her people of every age slipped on ice. She ignored the comment. She asked where I kept my house keys. I told her Robert had a spare. She said family should control access, not neighbors. That sentence bothered me. But I was tired and medicated. I gave her the location of the emergency key inside my bedside table. After surgery, I experienced temporary confusion. The doctors said anesthesia and pain medication caused it. For one evening, I forgot which day it was. I asked the same nurse twice when Helen would arrive. By the next morning, my mind was clear. Claire later treated those few hours as permanent evidence. The hospital recommended a rehabilitation facility for physical therapy, not a nursing home, a short-term rehabilitation center. Claire handled the arrangements. She chose Pinecrest Senior Living, a private facility 40 miles from my house. The brochure described it as a recovery retreat. It showed gardens, bright rooms, therapy pools, and smiling residents. I agreed to stay for 2 weeks. Claire brought papers to my hospital room. She said they were admission forms. I attempted to read them. She became irritated. "Dad, there are dozens of pages." I already reviewed everything. I told her I did not sign documents without reading them. She sighed. "You inspected buildings for 40 years. You don't have to inspect your own daughter." The sentence carried more truth than she intended. A nurse entered before I signed the final section. Claire collected the papers quickly. Later, she returned with a tablet and asked me to sign electronically. The screen displayed only a signature box. I asked to see the full document. She said the system did not allow it. I refused. Her expression changed for half a second. Then she smiled and told me we could handle it later. That refusal may have saved my home. I entered Pinecrest 3 days later. The facility was clean, quiet, and professionally managed. But it was not the temporary rehabilitation center Claire described. Most residents lived there permanently. Several had advanced dementia. The doors required staff codes. Personal phones were discouraged. Visitors had scheduled hours. My room contained a narrow bed, a dresser, and 1 chair. I asked when physical therapy would begin. A nurse said my assessment had been scheduled for the following week. I told her I was expected to stay only 14 days. She looked at the file. According to the admission record, I was a long-term resident. The listed reason was progressive cognitive decline combined with unsafe independent living. My hip injury appeared as a secondary issue. I demanded to see the paperwork. The nurse said only my authorized representative could access the full file. The authorized representative was Claire. I called her. She spoke calmly. She said the long-term classification was temporary and necessary for insurance. I asked why the file claimed cognitive decline. She blamed hospital language. I asked when I could leave. She said we would discuss it after my assessment. Then she changed the subject. She told me not to worry about the house. She had arranged everything. That phrase caused a cold pressure in my chest. What did you arrange? Maintenance, bills, security, everything. I asked whether Robert was checking the property. Claire said she had changed the locks. I sat upright. Why? She claimed one of the doors was damaged. I knew it was not. I demanded a new key. She said there was no reason for me to have one while I was recovering. The call ended with her promising to visit that weekend. She did not come. My phone disappeared the next morning. A staff member said Claire had requested that it be stored because frequent calls increased my agitation. I was not agitated until they took the phone. I asked for the facility telephone. The receptionist said, outgoing calls required approval from my representative. Every exit had quietly closed. I began paying attention. My medical chart contained statements I had never made. It claimed I became confused after sunset. It said I attempted to leave the building without understanding the danger. It said I had difficulty managing money. One note stated that I believed my deceased wife was still alive. That claim came from the single post-surgical evening when I asked for Helen. Temporary confusion after anesthesia had become a permanent diagnosis. I requested a meeting with the facility doctor. The appointment was delayed. I requested my attorney. The social worker told me Claire was already handling legal matters. I requested Robert. The receptionist said he was not on my approved visitor list. Claire had isolated me carefully. She did not need chains. She used forms. For 5 days, I followed the rules. I attended therapy. I remained calm. I documented names and times in a small notebook, hidden inside a paperback book. I watched how the facility operated. Staff members were not cruel. Most believed they were protecting me. Claire had given them a story: an aging widower, a dangerous fall, medication confusion, a devoted daughter making difficult decisions. She had converted control into compassion. The first break came from a young physical therapist named Maya Patel. Maya noticed that my reasoning did not match the file. During therapy, she asked me to describe my home exercise plan. I gave her detailed answers. She tested my memory informally. I remembered every instruction. One afternoon, she asked whether I truly wanted long-term placement. I told her no. I explained that I had agreed only to rehabilitation. Maya looked uncomfortable. She said my daughter had told staff I became aggressive whenever discharge was discussed. I asked whether I seemed aggressive. She shook her head. I showed her the notebook. Dates, requests, denied calls, missing phone, false statements. Maya did not promise anything. But the following morning, a patient rights advocate visited my room. Her name was Susan Bell. She worked independently from the facility. Susan asked whether we could speak privately. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she asked whether I had signed a guardianship order or power of attorney. I had signed a limited medical power years earlier, naming Claire in case I became unconscious. I had never given her authority to declare me incompetent, control my property, or restrict communication. Susan requested copies of my admission documents. The facility resisted. She reminded them of state law. By afternoon, we received part of the file. Several signatures appeared at the bottom of forms. They looked like mine. They were not. One document granted Claire broad authority over financial and residential decisions. Another stated I voluntarily surrendered the right to leave without medical approval. A third authorized the facility to restrict communications. My signature had been copied from an older medical directive. Claire had forged my name. I felt sick. The betrayal was not theoretical anymore. My daughter had used paperwork to erase my voice. Susan contacted my attorney, David Mercer. David had managed my estate planning for nearly 20 years. Claire told Pinecrest that David had retired. He had not. When he arrived the next day, he carried a leather briefcase and the kind of anger lawyers reserve for carefully documented wrongdoing. He closed the door. Then he said, "Thomas, your daughter has been busy." David had received a strange request 2 weeks earlier. Claire asked for a copy of my trust. She claimed the hospital needed it. David refused because I had not authorized the release. Claire then told him I had selected a different attorney. He became suspicious. After Susan's call, he examined county records. No deed transfer had occurred, but something else had. A property management company called North Star Executive Rentals had registered my house as an available luxury rental. Online photographs showed my living room, bedrooms, dock, and kitchen. The listing described the property as fully furnished. Monthly rent, $12,000. Security deposit, $12,000. Minimum lease, 1 year. Available immediately. The owner was listed as Reed Family Holdings. I had never created such a company. David searched business records. Claire had registered Reed Family Holdings 6 days after my surgery. She listed herself as manager. She used my home address. She claimed authority through the forged financial document. The property management company believed she legally controlled the house. An open house was scheduled for Saturday, 3 days away. I stared at the photographs on David's tablet. Strangers had entered my home. My bedroom was photographed. Helen's reading room appeared in the listing. The description called it a charming private office. Our family photographs had been removed. The dining table was decorated with staged flowers. My house had been transformed into a product while I sat behind coded doors. I asked where my belongings were. David did not answer immediately. That hesitation told me enough. Claire had hired movers. Most personal items were placed inside a storage facility. Some furniture remained because the rental was advertised as furnished. Helen's clothes had been donated. My tools were scheduled for auction. My truck had been moved to Claire's garage. My boat was listed for sale. She had not simply rented my house. She had begun dismantling my identity. I asked David what she planned to do with the rental income. He opened a financial report. Claire and Michael were in serious trouble. Their mortgage was 6 months behind. Claire's business owed more than $200,000. Michael had lost his largest sales territory. They carried enormous credit card debt. A private school tuition payment for their son was overdue. They needed immediate cash. The $24,000 expected from the first tenant would cover the mortgage default and several urgent bills. After that, the monthly rent would keep their lifestyle alive. Claire believed I would remain at Pinecrest permanently. She planned to pay the facility's basic fee from my pension. She would collect $12,000 monthly from my home. Eventually, she intended to petition for guardianship and sell the property. The nursing home was not the final destination. It was the waiting room while she transferred my life into her control. David asked whether I wanted the open house cancelled immediately. My first instinct was yes. I wanted the locks changed, the listing removed, the police called. But years of fire investigation had taught me something. A hidden failure was easier to deny. A visible failure created witnesses. Claire had already forged documents. She had already isolated me. She had already moved my belongings. But if confronted privately, she would say she misunderstood my wishes. She would claim concern. She would blame the facility. She would destroy records. I wanted the entire operation exposed while it was active. I asked David whether the open house could continue safely. He considered the question. Then he smiled without humor. Yes, he said, and it may be the cleanest way to prove intent. We began planning. First, I needed to leave Pinecrest legally. Susan arranged an independent medical evaluation. A geriatric psychiatrist examined me for 3 hours. He tested memory, judgment, attention, language, problem-solving, and financial understanding. I described my investments. I explained the forged paperwork. I remembered sequences of words and numbers. I analyzed hypothetical risks. The psychiatrist concluded that I possessed full decision-making capacity. My surgeon confirmed that I could continue hip rehabilitation at home. David delivered formal revocation notices to Pinecrest. Claire's authority was terminated. The facility's attorney reviewed the forged forms and immediately changed position. They had accepted documents without proper verification. They did not want litigation. I could leave, but we did not tell Claire. Instead, Pinecrest's administration informed her that my assessment had been delayed. Claire believed I remained trapped. Next, David froze Reed Family Holdings. He notified the bank that the company was created through fraudulent authority. The rental account was monitored. No money could be withdrawn. The property management company received a legal preservation notice, but was instructed not to cancel the open house yet. Its owner, Rachel Monroe, was horrified when she learned the truth. She had met Claire twice. Claire presented herself as my responsible daughter. She showed forged documents and claimed I had entered permanent memory care. Rachel agreed to cooperate. She would allow applicants to attend. She would not sign a final lease. Any deposits would remain protected. Financial crimes investigators prepared to observe the transaction. David recovered my phone from the facility. There were 67 missed calls and messages. Most came from Robert. He had seen movers at the house. Claire told him I had permanently relocated. When he questioned her, she threatened to call police for trespassing. One voicemail contained his voice breaking with frustration. "Tom, I don't know whether you're hearing these, but something is wrong. Call me." I called him. For several seconds, Robert said nothing. Then he asked whether I was safe. I told him I would be. He offered his guest room. I accepted. On Friday evening, Susan drove me out of Pinecrest through the main entrance. No escape. No secret doorway. I signed my discharge papers with my real signature. The receptionist returned my wallet, watch, and phone. My daughter had placed me there, using a false version of my name. I walked out under my own authority. Robert waited in the parking lot. He hugged me carefully because of my hip. The winter air felt sharper and cleaner than anything I had breathed inside the facility. We drove toward the lake. I asked him not to pass my house. I was not ready. At his home, David and Rachel waited around the kitchen table. They showed me the list of open house applicants. Several families had registered. The strongest applicant was a corporate attorney named James Porter and his wife, Allison. They were relocating from Boston with 2 children. They believed the owner had moved into long-term care. They planned to pay the full deposit and first month immediately. The transaction would create undeniable evidence. I did not want innocent people humiliated. David promised they would be protected. The investigators would explain everything. Their money would never leave their control. The open house would become a witness event, not a trap for tenants. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about Claire as a child. She once became lost at a county fair when she was 6. Helen and I searched for 20 terrifying minutes. We found her sitting beside a police officer, holding an ice cream cone. The moment she saw me, she ran into my arms. For years, that memory represented fatherhood, protecting her, finding her, making the world safe again. Now my daughter had locked me away and taken my home. Part of me still wanted to find the frightened child inside her. But the adult Claire was not lost. She knew exactly where she was going. She had followed money. Saturday morning arrived under a pale blue sky. Snow covered the edges of the yard. From Robert's car, parked 2 houses away, I could see my driveway. A large open house sign stood near the road. Balloons were tied to the mailbox. My mailbox. At 9:15, Rachel arrived. At 9:30, Claire and Michael pulled into the driveway. Claire wore the cream blazer. Michael carried boxes of brochures. They looked confident. They entered through my front door. At 9:47, the first applicants arrived. Then another couple. Then James and Allison Porter. Their children remained with Allison's sister. By 10, 6 adults were walking through the house. Claire greeted each person warmly. She explained the lake access. She described the school district. She mentioned that the owner had transitioned peacefully into assisted living. Peacefully. I gripped the edge of the car seat. David reminded me to wait. The investigators needed Claire to accept a deposit or make a direct representation of authority. At 10:23, James and Allison stood near the fireplace. Claire discussed lease terms. She said multiple families were interested. She encouraged them to secure the house immediately. James asked whether the owner could later change his mind. Claire smiled. The owner no longer has legal capacity to manage the property. I have full authority. That sentence was recorded. James asked to see documentation. Claire opened a folder. She displayed the forged authorization. Allison asked whether I had willingly moved. Claire said yes. She claimed I had become unsafe and confused. She said I occasionally failed to recognize family members. Another lie. Recorded. James said they were ready to proceed. He produced a cashier's check for $12,000. Allison prepared an electronic transfer for the first month. Rachel placed the lease on the dining table. Claire signed as manager of Reed Family Holdings. Then James handed her the check. She accepted it. That was the moment. David nodded. I opened the car door. My hip remained stiff, so I used a cane. I hated needing it. Then I remembered that strength was not measured by how a person entered a room. It was measured by what they refused to surrender once inside. I walked up the driveway. Michael saw me through the window. His face changed. He moved toward Claire. Before he reached her, I opened the front door. The room became quiet. Claire turned. For 1 second, she looked like the 6-year-old girl at the fair. Surprised. Afraid. Then the adult mask returned. Dad? I looked around. Strangers stood inside my home. My family photographs were gone. A vase of artificial flowers rested on Helen's dining table. Rental brochures covered the wood. I addressed the room. My name is Thomas Reed. I am the legal owner of this house. I did not authorize it to be rented. James looked at the check in Claire's hand. Allison stepped closer to him. Claire laughed nervously. She told everyone I had left the nursing facility without permission. She said I was confused. She asked Michael to call Pinecrest. I held up my discharge papers. I checked out legally. Claire's expression tightened. She told me we could discuss the matter privately. I looked at the applicants. No, you made my home public. The truth can be public too. David entered behind me. He introduced himself. Then Rachel closed the front door. Claire realized the property manager was not on her side. David presented the medical competency report. He presented the revocation of authority. He presented the business registration records. He presented evidence that my signature had been copied. James read the first page. His face hardened. He asked Claire whether she forged the authorization. Claire said I had signed it at the hospital. I asked her to describe the moment. She claimed I signed the forms after surgery. I reminded her that a nurse had interrupted us, and I refused the electronic signature. Claire changed the story. She said I signed later. David produced hospital access logs showing she was not present at the time listed on the document. Michael stepped backward. That movement told me he had not understood the full plan. Or he wanted everyone to believe he had not. Claire pointed at me. She said my sudden denial proved cognitive decline. She told the applicants that elderly people often became paranoid. The geriatric psychiatrist stepped through the doorway. He had agreed to attend as an independent witness. He stated that he examined me 2 days earlier and found no cognitive impairment preventing independent decisions. Claire stared at him. Her lies were losing oxygen. Then the investigators entered. A man named Daniel Foster identified himself as part of the County Financial Crimes Unit. His partner stood near the door. Foster asked Claire to place the cashier's check on the table. She refused. She said the check belonged to her company. Foster explained that Reed Family Holdings was under investigation for fraud. The bank account was frozen. The authorization was disputed. The property owner had denied consent. Claire looked toward Michael. "Say something." Michael shook his head. "I told you this was too far." Claire turned on him immediately. "You signed the company papers." Michael said he believed I had agreed. Claire reminded him he helped move my belongings. He said she told him I requested it. Their alliance began collapsing in front of everyone. James asked whether their deposit was safe. Rachel assured him the lease was invalid and the funds would remain untouched. Allison looked at Claire with disgust. "You put your father in a facility so you could rent his house." Claire began crying. She said nobody understood the pressure she faced. She described bills, mortgage payments, business debt, her son's school. She said, "I lived alone in a valuable house while her family struggled." There it was. Not an apology, a justification. My home existed. She needed money. Therefore, in her mind, my home should become money. I asked why she did not simply ask. She laughed bitterly. "Because you always say no." The words echoed through the room. She did not forge documents because communication failed. She forged them because consent stood between her and what she wanted. I asked about Helen's clothes. Claire wiped her face. She said most were donated. I asked who gave her permission. She replied that I did not need them. I asked about my tools. She said they were taking space. I asked about the boat. She said maintenance was expensive. Every answer revealed the same belief. My preferences no longer mattered. Age had turned me, in her mind, into an obstacle, occupying useful assets. I looked at James and Allison. "I'm sorry you were brought into this." James shook his head. "You don't owe us an apology." Claire attempted to leave. Foster stopped her. He asked whether she would answer questions voluntarily. She demanded a lawyer. That was her right. Foster informed her that she was not free to remove documents or funds connected to the transaction. Michael agreed to cooperate immediately. Claire looked at him with pure hatred. He handed Foster his phone. Within minutes, investigators found messages between them. Michael had questioned the plan, but he had still participated. He helped move furniture. He signed business paperwork. He expected part of the rental income. His hesitation did not make him innocent. It merely made him less committed than Claire. The applicants left one by one. James placed the cashier's check back inside his folder. Before leaving, Allison touched my arm. "I'm glad you came home." The same words another betrayed homeowner might have heard. I thanked her. Rachel removed the open house sign. Robert carried it into the garage. The balloons came down. The strangers disappeared. Then I stood alone in the living room. The silence felt unnatural. The house looked familiar and foreign at the same time. Helen's reading chair was missing. My photographs were missing. Several shelves were empty. A staged bowl of lemons rested on the kitchen counter. Claire had turned grief into decoration. I walked toward the reading room. The shelves had been cleared of Helen's favorite books. Only neutral hardcovers remained, selected by the staging company for color. I opened the closet beneath the stairs. Empty. Helen had spent hundreds of evenings in that room. She read mystery novels. She wrote birthday cards. She wrapped Christmas presents. Claire reduced it to a rental feature. Something inside me broke. I sat on the floor. My hip hurt. I did not care. For several minutes, I cried without making a sound. David waited in the hallway. He did not interrupt. Eventually, I looked up. "I want everything back." He nodded. "We'll get what we can." That phrase frightened me. What we can. Some things might already be gone. The storage facility returned my personal belongings over the next week. Boxes filled the house. All clothes, documents, photographs, kitchenware, tools. Helen's reading chair came back with a tear in the fabric. The auction company had not yet sold my tools. The boat listing was cancelled. My truck returned from Claire's garage. But several items were missing. Helen's jewelry box, a collection of first edition books, an antique clock from her parents, a silver tea service. Claire had sold them through private marketplaces. Investigators traced some sales. Others disappeared. The financial value was not enormous. The emotional loss was. Claire had entered rooms full of memories and identified anything convertible to cash. She did not steal randomly. She evaluated, photographed, listed, negotiated, collected payment. Each step required time. At any moment, she could have stopped. She did not. The criminal investigation expanded. Pinecrest provided every document. The forged admission forms became central evidence. The facility faced its own regulatory review for accepting questionable signatures and restricting my communication without proper verification. Several staff members apologized. I believed most had acted from ignorance rather than cruelty. Systems could become dangerous, even when individuals believed they were helping. That was another lesson from fire safety. A locked door did not need malicious intent to become deadly. It only needed to block the wrong person at the wrong time. Claire's attorney attempted to describe the situation as a family misunderstanding. He said she believed she possessed authority. He said she acted to protect me. The bank records told a different story. Before placing me at Pinecrest, Claire had already researched rental values. She contacted staging companies. She registered Reed Family Holdings. She created an email account using my name. She forwarded my pension information to the facility. She calculated the difference between my monthly pension and the lowest cost room at Pinecrest. One message to Michael stated, "His pension covers the facility. The lake house covers us. It solves everything." That sentence destroyed the caregiving defense. I was not a father in her plan. I was a financial system. Pension in, facility payment out, rental income redirected to her. She had engineered my disappearance to create positive cash flow. The charges included fraud, forgery, identity theft, theft of property, financial exploitation of an older adult, and unlawful restriction of my rights. Michael accepted a plea agreement. He admitted participating in the company registration and movement of property. He claimed Claire designed the plan. He provided messages and passwords. In exchange, he avoided prison, but received probation, restitution obligations, and a permanent criminal record. His marriage to Claire collapsed before the case ended. He moved into a small apartment. Their house entered foreclosure. Claire refused a plea for months. She insisted she had acted out of concern. Then investigators recovered a deleted recording from her phone. She had recorded a conversation with a rental agent before my accident. In it, she discussed the house's value. The agent asked whether I planned to move. Claire replied, "He doesn't know it yet, but he will." The plan existed before I fell. The ice did not create the opportunity. It accelerated a decision she had already made. That discovery hurt more than almost anything else. My accident was not the origin. She had been waiting. When sentencing finally arrived, I attended in person. My hip had healed enough to walk without the cane. Claire sat beside her attorney wearing a dark dress. She looked smaller than I remembered. For months, I had imagined the moment. I expected anger. Instead, I felt grief. The child I raised sat before a judge because she tried to erase me. Claire asked to speak. She said she loved me. She said debt created panic. She said Michael pressured her. She said she believed the house would eventually become hers. That last sentence contained the truth. Eventually. She believed future inheritance created present entitlement. She believed biology gave her early access. She apologized for the method, but not completely for the belief underneath it. Then she mentioned her son, my grandson. She said prison would separate him from his mother. She asked me to show mercy for his sake. The same emotional strategy returned. Use someone I loved to avoid consequences. I looked at my grandson sitting behind her. He was 15. His face was pale. I felt terrible for him. But protecting him did not require teaching him that adults escaped accountability through family pressure. The judge asked whether I wished to speak. I stood. I told the court that Claire had not placed me in a nursing home because I needed care. She placed me there because locked doors made property easier to control. She had converted a temporary injury into permanent captivity. She had used my wife's death, my age, and the trust between parent and child as tools. I explained that the most frightening part was not the forged signature. It was how easily people believed her. She was younger, organized, confident. She used words like safety, concern, and responsibility. I was old, injured, and grieving. The world was prepared to believe that her control represented care. I told the judge that older people disappeared this way every day. Not always physically. Sometimes financially. Sometimes legally. Sometimes inside homes that still carried their names. Claire began crying. I continued. I said I did not hate my daughter. Hatred would keep me tied to her choices. But love no longer required access. Forgiveness no longer required rescue. And family no longer required silence. The judge sentenced Claire to prison, followed by supervised release and restitution. The sentence was less than prosecutors requested, and more than her attorney expected. As deputies approached, Claire turned toward me. "Dad, please." That word still had power. Not enough to change my decision, but enough to hurt. I remained still. She was led away. The courtroom door closed. I walked outside into cold sunlight. There was no triumph. Only the strange emptiness that follows a fire after the flames are gone. The structure may still stand, but everything smells different. My grandson, Ethan, came to see me 2 weeks later. He arrived with Michael. At first, Ethan would not enter the house. He stood on the porch, staring at the floor. I opened the door wider. He asked whether I blamed him. I said no. He began crying. Claire had told him I was confused. She said I wanted to live at Pinecrest. She said renting the house would help pay for my care. He believed her. Children usually believe their parents. I understood that better than anyone. Ethan entered. He looked around at the boxes. He helped return books to Helen's reading room. For several hours, we worked without discussing Claire. Then he asked whether I would ever forgive her. I said forgiveness was not a single door that opened or closed. It was a process. I could let go of the desire to punish her personally. The law handled consequences. But trust required evidence, and access required safety. I told him Claire might change. She might accept responsibility. She might become someone capable of an honest relationship. But I would not build decisions around possibility. I would respond to reality. Ethan nodded. He was young, but he understood. Over the following months, he visited regularly. We repaired the damaged reading chair together. I taught him how to use basic tools. He had spent years believing manual work was something people hired others to do. He discovered he liked building things. One afternoon, we replaced a loose board on the dock. He asked whether I had ever wanted a son. I laughed. No. I wanted you to arrive safely on the ladder. That answer made him smile. Our relationship did not repair what Claire destroyed. But it created something new. The house slowly became mine again. I replaced the locks, installed cameras, updated legal documents, created a trust, managed jointly by David and a professional fiduciary. No family member could control the property without independent review. Some people told me that was harsh. They said Ethan might feel excluded. I explained the trust to him directly. He said he understood. Real protection did not depend on secrecy. It depended on clear rules. I also changed my medical directives. Claire's name was removed. David and Susan became authorized contacts. The patient rights advocate who helped free me had earned more trust in 2 days than my daughter preserved in decades. That fact remained painful, but trust was not awarded by title. It was earned through behavior. Pinecrest invited me to participate in a review of its admission policies. At first, I refused. Then, I reconsidered. The facility had failed me, but improving the system could protect others. I worked with administrators to create stricter identity verification, private patient interviews, independent consent review, unrestricted access to advocates, and automatic legal checks when long-term placement followed a temporary hospitalization. Staff members received training about coercive control. A calm daughter with organized paperwork could still be dangerous. An angry resident could still be telling the truth. Behavior needed context. The facility placed a patient rights telephone in every room. Calls could not be blocked by family representatives. That change alone might save someone. I used part of the recovered rental funds and restitution payments to create a small foundation named after Helen. The Helen Reed Home and Dignity Project provided legal help to seniors facing forced placement, property fraud, or financial abuse. David served on the board. Susan joined as an advisor. Robert volunteered. Our first case involved a retired mechanic whose nephew tried to sell his workshop while he recovered from a stroke. The second involved a woman whose son redirected her pension after moving her into memory care. The third involved an elderly couple pressured to sign over their farm. The stories shared common elements: isolation, urgency, family authority, documents nobody fully explained, claims of confusion, money hidden beneath the language of care. I spoke publicly at community centers. I told people to protect themselves before a crisis. Create independent powers of attorney. Name backup representatives. Require multiple signatures for property transfers. Review deeds regularly. Keep personal advocates outside the immediate family. Never assume love makes legal safeguards unnecessary. Good people do not fear transparent protections. Only people who expect unchecked control object to them. Some audience members asked whether I regretted allowing the open house to happen. The question was fair. Innocent applicants entered my home. They became part of a painful confrontation. But every applicant received immediate explanation and protection. No funds were lost. More importantly, the open house created witnesses to Claire's direct claims. She stated that I lacked capacity. She displayed forged authority. She accepted money. She signed the lease. The truth became impossible to reduce to a private disagreement. Claire made my home into a public transaction. I used that public moment to restore my ownership. I did not enjoy humiliating her. Humiliation was a consequence of her confidence colliding with evidence. There is a difference between revenge and exposure. Revenge seeks pain. Exposure seeks truth. Sometimes truth causes pain, because lies have become comfortable. The following Christmas, Ethan came to the lake house. Michael dropped him off, but did not stay. Our relationship remained distant. He had participated in the scheme, even if he did not design it. I was polite. Trust would require years. Ethan and I decorated the maple tree near the lake with outdoor lights. Helen had always wanted to do that. The temperature fell below freezing. Our fingers became numb. The lights tangled. We argued about which end belonged at the outlet. It was the most normal Christmas experience I had enjoyed in years. Inside, we cooked dinner at Helen's table. The table Claire had used for rental contracts. Now it held soup, bread, and a small apple pie. After dinner, Ethan gave me a package. Inside was a wooden sign he made in shop class. It read, "A home is where your voice still matters." I placed it above the entrance to Helen's reading room. That sentence captured everything. A house could remain legally yours while your voice disappeared. A facility could claim to care while preventing you from speaking. A family could say it loved you while treating your wishes as inconvenience. Home was not simply ownership. It was autonomy. It was the right to decide who entered, the right to stay, the right to leave. The right to say no without being labeled confused. Claire wrote from prison. Her first letters focused on hardship, the food, the noise, the separation from Ethan, the shame. She apologized, but every apology returned to her suffering. I did not respond. Months later, the tone changed. She stopped blaming Michael. She stopped describing the plan as temporary. She admitted researching rental companies before my fall. She admitted that debt made her resent my security. She wrote, "I told myself you were wasting the house because you were only one person. I stopped seeing that one person as my father." That sentence felt different. It did not ask for money. It did not ask for legal help. It did not use Ethan. It acknowledged the core harm. I read the letter several times. Then I placed it inside a drawer. I still did not respond. Recognition was the beginning of accountability. It was not proof of change. A person could write the correct words and remain dangerous. I needed time. She needed time. The old version of me would have rushed toward reconciliation because discomfort felt unbearable. The new version understood that patience could protect both people. 1 year after the open house, I visited Claire. The meeting occurred behind glass. She looked older. Prison had removed the polished image. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I'm sorry." I asked what she was sorry for. It was not a cruel question. It was a necessary one. Claire looked down. She said she was sorry for treating my life like a financial problem. She was sorry for using my injury, for forging my name, for removing Helen's things, for telling people I was confused, for isolating me, for believing that being my daughter entitled her to control. She did not mention the sentence. She did not mention the house she lost. She did not ask for help. I listened. Then I said, "Thank you for saying it." She looked disappointed. Perhaps she expected more. Forgiveness, a promise, restored trust. I could not provide those things yet. I told her I hoped she continued the work she had begun. I said our future would depend on her actions after release. Not tears, not promises, not family pressure. Actions. Claire nodded. Before the visit ended, she asked about the house. I told her the roses had survived winter. She smiled weakly. For the first time in years, our conversation involved the home without discussing its value. That mattered. But I remained careful. Compassion and caution could exist together. 2 years have passed since the open house. Claire is still serving her sentence. Michael works a regular sales job and lives modestly. Ethan studies construction management. He says he wants to build affordable housing. Perhaps something good can grow from this family's worst season. I remain in the lake house. I am slower now. I hire help for snow removal. I use railings. I attend physical therapy. Accepting assistance does not mean surrendering authority. That distinction is important. Older people sometimes reject all help because control has been disguised as help before. True assistance expands independence. Abuse reduces it. Robert helps with the dock. Ethan handles heavy work. David manages legal protections. Susan checks in. I am not isolated, and no single person holds enough authority to erase me again. Every morning, I walk through Helen's reading room. The restored chair sits beside the window. Most books returned. The missing first editions never did. The antique clock remains gone. Those empty spaces remind me that recovery is not reversal. You do not always get everything back. Some losses remain. But loss does not mean the abuser wins. I still have my voice, my home, my decisions, my name. Claire believed placing me in a nursing home would make me disappear. Instead, it taught me how visible I needed to become. I began speaking at conferences about elder financial abuse. I told professionals to watch for certain phrases. He doesn't understand. She agreed, but she forgot. We're only doing what's best. Family handles everything. Visitors upset him. Her phone causes agitation. Those statements might be true. They might also be tools. Ask the older person privately. Verify signatures. Confirm intent independently. Never allow one family member to become the only source of reality. A person's age does not automatically make someone else's story more credible. That lesson should not require tragedy. But too often, it does. The greatest danger Claire created was not the rental listing. It was the narrative. Once people accepted that I was confused, every objection became additional proof. If I demanded to leave, I was agitated. If I questioned documents, I was paranoid. If I called repeatedly, I was obsessive. If I mentioned Helen after surgery, I was delusional. The system became circular. The story proved itself, because every attempt to reject it was interpreted through the story. Breaking that cycle required an outsider willing to listen. Maya noticed. Susan investigated. David acted. Robert refused to accept Claire's explanation. People saved me because they treated my words as evidence rather than symptoms. That is why speaking matters. And why listening matters even more. Many people ask whether I still love Claire. Yes. Love did not disappear. That was part of the difficulty. If she had been a stranger, the decision would have been simple. Love created grief. Memories created hesitation. Hope created vulnerability. But love is not a legal authorization. It is not permission. It is not immunity. I can love my daughter and still support the consequences of her choices. I can hope she changes without giving her access to my accounts. I can visit without returning house keys. I can forgive emotionally while maintaining legal boundaries. Mature love does not require pretending danger no longer exists. It tells the truth and builds accordingly. The day I returned during the open house, Claire accused me of destroying the family. For a long time, that phrase haunted me. Then I understood. The family was not destroyed when I entered the room. It was damaged when she forged my name. It was damaged when she locked my phone away. It was damaged when she donated Helen's clothes. It was damaged when she told strangers I no longer recognized people. The open house did not create the betrayal. It removed the curtains. People often blame the person who reveals the truth because exposure is visible. The betrayal happened privately. The confrontation happened publicly. Public events attract judgment, but secrecy protects the wrong person. I no longer confuse silence with dignity. Sometimes, dignity requires speaking loudly enough for witnesses. Claire's scheme depended on my embarrassment. She believed I would not tell people my own daughter placed me in a nursing home. She believed I would fear gossip. She believed I would protect her image. She was right about the old Thomas. The old Thomas absorbed discomfort to preserve peace. The new Thomas understood that peace built on self-erasure was not peace. It was captivity. My house now belongs to a protected trust. After my death, Ethan will not automatically inherit it. Instead, the trust will support the Helen Reed Home and Dignity Project. Ethan may serve on the board if independent trustees determine he has demonstrated integrity and commitment. He knows this. He supports it. That response tells me more about his character than any promise could. Entitled people demand inheritance. Responsible people respect purpose. Claire once told me the lake house was wasted on one old man. She was wrong. The house now hosts legal clinics, training sessions, support groups. Young advocates learn how to protect vulnerable adults in Helen's reading room. People who feared losing their homes sit at our dining table and receive help. The property serves more lives now than it ever could as a luxury rental. Claire wanted it to produce money. I chose to make it produce protection. That is the difference between extracting value and creating it. On quiet evenings, I sit near the lake. The open house sign is long gone. The balloons are gone. The strangers are gone. The house no longer feels staged. The bowl of artificial lemons disappeared immediately. Helen would have hated it. Her roses bloom beside the walkway. The maple tree leans slightly toward the water. Ethan's wooden sign hangs inside. A home is where your voice still matters. I think about that sentence often. If your voice does not matter, ownership is only paperwork. If your decisions can be overridden without evidence, freedom is temporary. If family members treat your wishes as obstacles, love has become distorted. Protect your voice before a crisis. Write your intentions. Choose independent advocates. Require verification. Review your accounts. Know who has keys. Know what documents exist. Do not wait until someone else explains your life on your behalf. The truth is easier to protect before it is challenged. And if the challenge has already begun, document everything. Dates, names, calls, forms, statements, financial activity. Abuse depends on confusion. Records create clarity. My daughter believed I would remain behind the doors of Pinecrest while she rented my house for $12,000 a month. She believed the world would trust her because she was younger, polished, and confident. She believed my pain medication had made me weak. She believed my grief made me controllable. She believed being my daughter meant I would never expose her. She misunderstood all of it. Age had not removed my intelligence. Injury had not removed my rights. Grief had not erased my judgment. And fatherhood had not cancelled my dignity. When I entered the open house, I was not seeking revenge. I was reclaiming reality. The applicants needed the truth. The property manager needed the truth. The investigators needed evidence. Claire needed consequences. And I needed to stand inside my own home and hear my own voice matter again. That was the real victory. Not the criminal case. Not the frozen account. Not the collapse of her business. The victory was one sentence spoken at my front door. I am the legal owner of this house. For weeks, Other people spoke for me. That sentence returned my name. Some stories end with reconciliation. This one ends with boundaries. Perhaps Claire and I will build a limited relationship after her release. Perhaps trust will grow slowly. Perhaps it will not. I no longer need certainty about the future. I need honesty in the present. Today, she is accountable for what she did. Today, I am safe. Today, my home remains mine. That is enough. The lesson of this story is simple. Never assume that concern is harmless simply because it comes from family. Real care asks what you want. Control tells others what you supposedly wanted. Real care protects your independence. Control makes your independence appear dangerous. Real care respects your voice. Control labels your voice confusion. And real love does not require you to disappear so someone else can profit. My daughter put me in a nursing home and rented out my house. I returned during her open house because private betrayal survives through secrecy. The moment truth entered the room, the entire plan collapsed. The forged authority, the false diagnosis, the rental company, the deposit, the image of the devoted daughter, all of it depended on my absence. So I came home. I opened the door, and I refused to leave my own life again. Tell me in the comments whether Thomas made the right decision by allowing the open house to begin before revealing the truth. Subscribe to Mark Cole. For more powerful stories about family betrayal, hidden courage, justice, and people who finally take back control of their lives,